Hello there, my fishy friends. I think I have a pretty interesting video to show you today. Lately, I've been having this debate with myself about whether I should be making fishing videos. And more I'm leaning towards the decision to not really make your classic fishing videos. Nobody needs to see me yanking fish out of the water. There are already a couple of people that do that really well. Fishing with rod in particular, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Rodney's angling skills, and his video filming and editing skills are just superb, so I don't feel I can top any of that. So I think I'll just stick to this kind of video, which in my opinion can be just as educational. I certainly learned a lot about Coho from watching this footage, and I think you can learn stuff too if you really pay attention. One of the really interesting things that I found in this video is that the fish are agitated at first. You can see them swimming by fairly quickly, and that's because I'm in the pool with them and they think I'm a sea lion or some predator of some sort. So they're kind of swimming around quickly, but they settle down within just a couple of minutes, and then you start to see some more natural behavior. One of the things that strikes me is that a lot of these fish are not pasted to the bottom like you think they would be. There isn't a big enough difference in this kind of run between the turbulent flow right next to the rocks and the laminar flow a little bit off the bottom to make it worth their while to be hugging their bottom. So you see these fish are 2, even 3 feet off the bottom, and what that means is that you can be fishing 3 or 4 feet off the bottom and still be catching lots of fish. When you have a run that doesn't have huge rocks and that really doesn't have a big difference between bottom speed of water and top speed of water, you can be fishing way off the bottom. You don't need to dredge it like a lot of people in the Vedder do. You don't need to be bouncing your lead along the rocks. And that way you'll lose a lot less gear and you'll probably catch more fish. Another really interesting thing I find is if you listen to the audio, you can hear that the river is kind of a loud place. There's some fast current nearby, and you can hear all the rocks clicking together, and the waves and the turbulence and the bubbles. It's not really a quiet place. Near the end of the video, there's some people fishing this pool. I think there were about 4 people casting into this pool, and you can occasionally hear their lures or the floats hitting the water, but it isn't really as disruptive as I thought it would be. You just barely make the difference, and it certainly doesn't make the fish flinch or shy away. Some other really interesting things I observed here is that the coho and the chum and the occasional chinook, they really don't school separately. They all seem to school as one school of fish. And when I started fishing, I always figured that when you're fishing a run, the chum will be in one spot and the coho will be in a different spot. But that really isn't the case. I think what happens is that there are many times when the chum are much more willing to bite than the coho. And so when you're pulling chum after chum out of a run like this, you just assume that there are no coho to be had. When in fact they're in there, they're just much more reluctant to take the hook. Another really interesting observation I get out of this is that a lot of the smaller fish are hatchery fish. So I think on average, there are some big hatchery fish in this video. Like if you compare them to the size of the chum, which you kind of know how big chum are, there are some big coho here. But I would say the average wild fish is bigger than the average hatchery fish. I would assume that's because the hatchery fish have a much easier life when they're smolts. They don't have to really fend for themselves, and they don't have to develop really aggressive hunting skills right from the time they emerge from the gravel. And that probably makes them a little bit less effective at foraging in the ocean. So I would say the wild fish have better hunting skills than the hatchery fish do, and that I think accounts for a lot of the size difference. Another really interesting observation I had out of this is that some of the fish have eye damage. And I think the eye damage happens when they get dragged up on shore. Fish don't have eyelids, so when they get scraped across rocks or sand or gravel, those eyes are very easily damaged, and then when the eye is abraded, fungus sets in, and those fish kind of go blind on one side. You can see that one wild buck in particular has a very damaged eye on one side, and even some damage on the top of his head from presumably some fishing line or hooks. I would encourage you to use a landing net for coho. Really not a good idea to drag coho up on the beach unless you've identified them as being a hatchery fish. The other thing that I notice here is that the fish are swimming in circles. You see the same individuals coming by several times. They're not really staying put. They're not just sitting there in one spot and resting. They're making these slow loops around the run, up and down. And so what that means is that you don't really need to be drifting that one specific spot to catch fish. Everybody always assumes that, there's one best spot in a run, and that may be. Maybe the fish are slightly more concentrated in some spots, but if you don't really get the spot that you want and you have to fish somewhere a little bit off of the prime spot, you're still going to catch fish. They're not stuck there like they're tethered to the bottom. They really do swim around. Anyway, I think I've talked long enough for one video. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learned something. And if you have some observations from this that you'd like to share in the comments, please do. I'd really appreciate hearing from you. I'm going to put on some music for the rest of the video. Hopefully you like it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.